This is my podcast, Trade Secrets. And today I have someone special. Everybody's special, by the way. But today I have Toby Scott with me.
Hello.
How you doing? It's
Good
to see you.
Yeah.
It was fortuitous that I saw you yesterday and was able to kidnap you.
Yeah.
Toby lives in Montana, and we're in L.A. We're in Studio One at East West, so I have the good fortune of being the manager. And one of the things about the podcast is it's sort of like how you got started or how you ended up in the business. And the one question I start with is, where were you born?
Well, I was born in Pasadena, California,
Okay.
not too far from here.
Yep.
And it was a short period of time in Pasadena because my father was in the Air Force. And I believe I was only a few months old when my mother flew on military transport to Greenville, South Carolina, or someplace like that.
I'm from South Carolina.
where he was stationed at a Air Force base.
Oh, wow.
And we lived there for a while, and then it was Rapid City, and then after Rapid City, Austin, Texas, I believe,
Oh, wow.
and then Guam.
Oh, Guam must have been cool.
Yeah,
Guam in the 60s?
there was nothing there. And it was quite cool because
Yeah.
my mother worked for a island insurance investor or insurance salesman.
Oh, nice.
And he was local. And so we got invited to parties, Guamanian parties, like out in the jungle.
Wow.
And I remember we
How
used
old were you? Like 10?
no, I was 5.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
Yeah. But I remember we used to go to this beach called Agana or something like that. And it was just like a mile and a half of sandy beach and palm trees
Gorgeous
and nothing.
pristine, yeah.
And now it's wall-to-wall hotels,
Yeah.
20 stories high,
Oh, God.
that continue around the beach.
And Guam is really, really hot, I think.
It's your usual island, you know,
Humid.
80 to 90 degrees.
Yeah,
all
well,
the
I
time.
grew up on an island. So.
Yeah.
So moving all around, and Dad's in the Air Force. My dad survived Normandy. My dad was an Army guy.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, it's craziness. And then went to work for Lockheed. So we moved all around, but we're always stationed. He worked on the safety systems for nuclear missiles on nuclear submarines. So we were
Oh.
always stationed near a Navy base, even though he worked for Lockheed.
Okay.
So yeah, that's hence Charleston, South Carolina.
Yeah.
But ports, you know.
Yeah.
So Guam, what after Guam?
After Guam, then it was Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska.
Oh,
Omaha.
What? Dude, Guam to Nebraska?
Yeah.
That's culture shock for your mom. And your dad.
Yeah, I guess, you know, we were used to moving around.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we lived in a town called Plattsmouth, Nebraska. It's, you know, funky little all-American town, you know, Central High School and the whole deal. Or Central, I guess I was in elementary or
Right.
middle school. And then from there, we moved to California,
Okay.
a little town called Atwater at Castle Air Force Base, which is in the middle of the San Joaquin Valley.
Nice.
Like very central in the middle of the San Joaquin
A lot
Valley.
of food.
South of Modesto.
A lot of fruit.
Yeah. And north of Fresno.
Oh, okay.
And I was in the Boy Scouts, used to go to Yosemite to camp out when you could
Nice.
just go into Yosemite and camp.
Yeah,
No
yeah, without
people.
all the rigmarole.
Yeah, and then...
Do you have siblings?
No, I don't.
Oh wow, an only child.
Yes, I am.
Wow, well traveled and an only child.
Yes. But after that, we moved to Santa Barbara. My father retired.
Nice.
And I moved to Santa Barbara. And I guess, I'm trying to think.
You went to high school in Santa Barbara?
Yes, I finished up, last 2 years of high school was in Santa Barbara. But I was trying to think when it was. I have the same story as
It's okay, we all do.
as the guy that I worked for.
Oh, that guy.
You know, asking how you got into music.
Right, yeah.
Well, where was we? Oh, yeah, we were in,
Did you play an instrument in high school?
well, in Plattsmouth, Nebraska, where my father was stationed at Offutt Air Force Base. I saw Elvis
Oh, man.
on
All
TV.
right.
It was like, ooh, that's
Wow.
cool.
That's very cool.
And I'm pleased to say that I was quite observant, because the first time he went on, I locked it and, wow, this is really cool, And then the second time he went on, I noticed that the bass player was playing an electric bass the second time.
Interesting.
The first time he was playing an upright.
Okay.
And so I went, oh, this is cool. And I took guitar lessons.
Like right away.
Well, yeah. My parents were cordial enough and agreeable. And they said, okay. And they went, I think we must have gone into Omaha to a music store.
Okay.
And got me a guitar, and I took
Remember
lessons.
your first guitar? What was it, like a
It
Strat
was
of
too
some
big.
kind? Oh, it was too big.
Yeah, it was like a J200 or something. And here I am. I'm like 6 years old or 7 years old. And
Like 60 pounds.
Yeah,
You weigh
and-
60 pounds and the guitar weighs 80.
yeah, about that. But I took lessons for a year and a half or something like that, and then I was like, oh, geez, this is a chore. Plus the fact that the teacher was, of course, teaching me, stuff like "Oh Susanna," "Bone don drun don dun drun
Right.
dun drun."
You want to be Elvis.
Yeah, I wanted to do that, and so I dropped the guitar lessons, and then we moved to California, and I forget. And I didn't do much when I was in Northern California. Oh, I was a Boy Scout, and so I
Well, you
went
by
through that.
Yosemite. That's a lot.
Yeah, and then when we moved to Southern California, I decided to get back into music. Something compelled me to get into music.
Interesting.
And
Was it the local music scene?
no, I was 15.
Oh, okay. Yeah, right.
Well,
Yeah.
but the thing was that right before he retired, I saw the Beatles.
Uh-oh.
I heard the Beatles,
Life
got
change.
their album,
Yep.
and then saw them on the Ed
Was it Meet
Sullivan
the
Show.
Beatles? Was that the first
Yep,
one?
the first one with the four of them, black
Yeah.
and white sort of cover. And
I remember the Ed Sullivan performance. I was little.
yeah, well, and then we moved to Santa Barbara, and my best friend, he was into the Rolling Stones.
I love them both.
So we were like, ooh, wow. And I got
By the way, I
in-
never understood why people said you have to pick one or the other. I like them
No,
both.
I
And I
like
also
them
don't
both.
understand why people talk about what record you would take to a desert island, because how would you have a turntable on a desert island?
Yeah, true. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry.
But
But he liked the Stones, your buddy?
yeah, and so I was sort of into the Beatles music thing and music. And I remember I took drum lessons for a couple of months, but there, of course, they want to teach you rat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat-tat.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I
Like
want
marching band stuff.
I want to do the whole
You
thing.
want to rock.
But
Toby wanted to rock.
yes, but so I ended up I dropped the drum lessons, and then I bought an acoustic guitar, a cheap, funky acoustic guitar. I think it was like $20 or something. It wasn't much.
Were you a songwriter?
No, but I bought a guitar, a Mel Bay book of chords, and a Bob Dylan songbook.
Nice.
And I would sit at home and play, and
We have to segue that he actually worked with Bob Dylan later.
Yes. But yeah, the first song that I learned was "Times They Are Changin'."
Oh, what a great song.
I keep thinking I want to remake that song
Dude, it would be so cool.
because it's
I think
relevant.
you should reach out to Bob Dylan and say, I think you need to do a remake of this.
Let me produce it.
Or have
Yeah.
Jacob do it.
Yeah.
Whatever. That would be kind of cool.
But
Jacob Dylan.
yeah.
So high school.
Yeah, so I'm playing this acoustic guitar, and I was into the Beatles, and I was a hippie. This is early on.
I wore this today for you.
Oh yeah.
I wore hippie jeans and a hippie shirt.
Yes, but you don't have the
And fuzzy
ribbon
slippers.
around the bottom of the
Yeah, I know. I
jeans.
just have like flowers on
Yeah.
them. I have flowers on them.
But so
Did you have
I'm st-
long hair?
I tried.
Yeah. Is your hair? You have lovely hair, but is your hair wavy? Like blonde wavy hair?
No, it was about the same color it is now. And I would try and grow it out, but every 6 weeks I got sent to the dean of boys,
Okay.
and it was me and two other guys
Yep.
that went down there. Brett, I think, was one of them, and Ray Orozco, who his brother went on to be a famous baseball player
I was
for
going
the
to say,
Yankees.
that's the
Yeah,
famous thing.
but anyway, Ray was in a band that was him and his family, and then Brett was went to the Stephen Stones or something like that.
So it made you keep your hair cut. And I kind of remember that, like when my brothers were in high school in the 60s.
Those guys got exempted because they had a reason. They were in bands, and they said to the dean of students, "Hey, we're in a band. You know, it's part of the look, and we got to do that."
Right.
You know, well, Toby, what are you? And I go, well, I like to grow it long. You know, and so the dean of students said, "Not while you're here." And it turned out that his brother was my homeroom teacher.
Oh, the dean?
Yes.
Nice.
And so he would just, "Toby, time to go to the office. You know, your hair's getting too long."
Oh, my God.
So I cut it. But they did tell me, you know, once you're out of school, you can grow it as long as you want. Yeah. So I did. It came down to my pockets by the time I finally started cutting it again.
Good for you.
But I'm hanging out in the hallway in between classes, and a guy comes up to me and he goes, "You're really cool. And I've got a band. Do you play anything?" And I said, "I play guitar." And he goes, "We got a band, and we don't need a guitar player, but we need a bass player.
Right on.
If you get a bass guitar and an amp, you can be in the band." I went, "Huh, okay." And I did part-time work for an uncle at the time, and so I went out and I bought a bass guitar and an amp. I think it was a Vox bass guitar.
Nice.
And the amp, I don't know what it was.
Is the bass amp for Vox got the same numbers? I know the guitar is an AC30 or an AC15. I wonder what the bass is.
No.
I wonder what the number is on the bass
well,
amp.
the amp was just what I could afford or something like that. And so I played in this band for a little while, and then they finally threw me out.
How were you as a bass player?
I was okay,
All right.
but I was, I don't know, I guess unleashed or a loose cannon.
See, I would think that because you had a little bit of rudimentary drum lessons, that bass would be good, because I always think about the bass player and the drummer locking.
Melding together.
And so
the
keeping
bass
in
drum,
that groove.
The bass drum and the bass guitar thumping together.
Keep it in that groove. So I would think if you've got that feel for drum.
I was okay, but the problem was our favorite song was Gloria.
Great song.
Which is 3 notes. Boom, 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 boom.
Dude, Van
boom,
Morrison.
Boom, boom.
And then Patti Smith does a good version too.
Yeah, but I just couldn't do that. And so I'm like, boom, 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 boom. And the band's going, no, just the 3 notes. Play, you know, and then I'd start vamping. And so they finally went, "You're out of here." And so I went and I just played with friends.
Yeah.
And once out of that band, then a friend of mine, and this is sort of the history of my recording career.
I love this.
A friend of mine said, "Hey, I want you to be in this band that I just joined." And I said, "Okay." And he goes, and then they conferred with the band, and they said, "Yeah, but we don't need another musician. We got 2 guitar players, a bass and drums, and then this guy singing lead."
They needed a live sound guy.
No, they wanted a manager.
Oh, cool.
So I said, "Okay, I'll manage them." And I ended up managing them. And you have to understand, this was 1967.
What did managing them entail?
Well,
getting them to the gig?
Part of it entailed me getting them gigs. I promoted and produced concerts of this band in little city parks where we could rent the
And this is in Santa Barbara?
The venues were generally in Ojai.
Okay, gotcha.
There was a little county park that they had a little building that held 100 people.
Still a great vestige of the hippie culture, Ojai.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And but during the course of that, I got into it, and I joined the union.
Wow.
I went through the whole hoops and was a AFM manager agent.
Good for
and
you.
Got the whole deal. Then I got the band an audition in Los Angeles, Hollywood.
Wow.
With Kim Fowley.
I know Kim Fowley well.
Yes.
Does anyone remember the Monster Mash?
Well, that wasn't Kim Fowley.
Oh, that wasn't Kim Fowley. No, Kim Fowley was the Runaways. He was the guy that found the Runaways.
Yes, but he had his own song.
What was his song, though? He had a song like the Monster Mash, but it was something like that.
No, it was like...
very tall. He looked like a skinny Boris Karloff.
Yes, he was...
He just passed not too long ago, I think.
But he So I don't know, through some means or another.
A character, though.
Yes. Yeah, and his songs were sort of joke songs to a certain extent.
What was his big hit song?
I don't know.
Anyway.
But so we go down to this audition.
He was a known character.
Oh, yes, but he was also a known personality. You know, he
Yeah.
had chart hits.
Yeah.
And we go up, and I remember, and he goes, I started talking to him, and he goes, "Are you in the band?" And I go, "No." And he goes, "You should be in the band. The rest of these guys are too clean cut. You should be in the band." And I go, "No, I'm not." But anyway, we took us into a studio.
What was the name of the band?
The Country Exchange.
Okay.
And they took us into a studio, which, as I recollect, because of the location, I think it was the predecessor to Producer's Workshop.
Oh, right, which is on
Because
Hollywood Boulevard.
It was just up off of Hollywood Boulevard in a little facility there, which was then later, or at that time, I don't know, became Doug Sax's mastering lab.
Doug Sax's mastering. And then Producer's Workshop, which is where he was.
Yes.
Now it's called Boulevard. It's still open, and it's very cool. It had a fire, but they rebuilt, and very cool.
But we went in there, and the singer froze, so that was the end of that band.
Oh, man, at the audition?
Well, at the recording.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, red light fever.
Yeah.
Maybe.
And so after that, I forget, the band broke up or whatever. And I found another band that I started managing, and I got them down to Hollywood again. And we went into what later became Clover Studios.
Yes.
At the time, I believe it was American Way.
And where was Clover?
Clover
Where was
was
American Way?
about 100 yards east of Vine Street on Santa Monica.
Right.
Directly across the street from Paramount Studios.
Right across the street from where Paramount is now.
Yes.
Oh,
And it's still
okay.
there.
I know that
And,
corner. And there's an Army-Navy surplus around the corner.
Right on the corner.
Right on the corner. Okay,
of,
yeah.
well, I don't know if it's there now.
Yeah, it
but
is. It is.
was. And on the other corner on the same side of the street was Gold Star.
And now that's like a mini mall kind
Yes.
of.
You
Very
know,
sad.
And Clover they had torn it out by the time I got there, but Clover held the reverb chamber, which was a box, of a size that Gold Star used for their reverb.
So wait, a physical box, not inside a room?
It was a box. I don't know what the thing behind me is, about the size of that height.
Oh, okay.
Wider.
Oh,
and,
okay.
about 6-8 feet
But
long.
a movable thing?
Well, it wasn't movable.
Oh, okay,
It was
no.
a big box in the back room.
All right, got it.
But anyway, at least that's what I heard. It wasn't there when I started working there. But
Because our chambers are all like little rooms and little spaces and crawl spaces and stuff.
I've been in a few echo
I know
chambers.
you are well. I know you're well aware. But
I've been in echo chambers in many studios.
Yeah. No, we have many here.
So we went in there, and they passed the audition. They did a good job. It was a band that had 2 drummers and guitar players and a singer.
What's the name of that band?
Harbinger.
Harbinger. Okay.
And we got back to Santa Barbara. That's where I was managing them. And I got word, hey, we want to give you a production contract, and we're ready to sign you up and start recording. And it's like, great. And I told the band, and they went, we're not ready. And they moved to San Francisco.
Oh, my God. What happened to the Harbinger guys? Do we know?
I do.
Oh.
The guitar player in the band had a unique name, and I happened to see him in the credits of a Star Trek
Holy crap.
episode, Wilson Dyer.
Okay, Wilson Dyer.
Dyer. And I got in touch with him. I tend to hook up with people that I haven't seen in years. But and he was the lead guitarist in the band, and now he's an engineer of some sort or whatever.
But he was an actor for a brief moment?
No, he was, it was in the audio credits or something like that. Yeah, I think. But anyway, I did that band.
I thought you were going to tell me they became Spirit.
No. No, but
that it was Randy California or something.
Well, those Randy California and the Spirit, they were Ojai based.
That's what I was going to say. I was wondering if you ever crossed paths with them.
Yeah, and then the turning point, which I just
so now you're your union manager. You got these bands. by the way, pussies who give up and don't tell, hey, it's my podcast, I say what I want. Yeah. And they give up, and then, but you're still like, you're kind of like doing it. You're managing, and you got your thing.
Yeah, and then I was into music. You know, I was still playing guitar, and you know, I had friends that I would play with them, and one band actually asked me to come over to their rehearsal, and they played a song. They said, well, what do you think? And I said, oh, well, you know, I gave them some ideas on what I thought about this, that, and the other thing. And it later dawned on me, you know, 20, 30 years later, that actually I was sort of producing the band.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah,
I didn't know. They wanted my ideas.
Yeah.
That's
what that's called, Toby.
They didn't want me in the band.
That's what it's called. When you give them your ideas, it's called producing.
Loose cannon. But
why are these?
So then, about a year after the band that moved off to San Francisco, my best friend's brother was the drummer of the Quicksilver Messenger Service.
Great band.
And
I'm going to listen to them later.
Right out of, I forget whether, right when I graduated high school.
What a great band.
He and I drove up to San Francisco, Mill Valley.
Yep.
And stayed with them, and, you know, got introduced to the San Francisco.
Didn't do any drugs.
No. Well, they were it was a time when everybody knew the whole thing, and yes, we could smoke pot. That was okay.
That's fine.
But LSD, they said, you've got to be supervised. We can't, and we got to make sure that you're mentally okay.
And heroin hadn't wandered its way in yet to that group. Good.
No. But
good.
Anyway, so I knew these guys, and so here it is, I don't know, a year or two later, Greg, the drummer, gives his brother a call and says, hey, I'm driving down from San Francisco, and I got a studio gig where we're recording our album, and do you want to come along? And his brother, Rod, said, no, and they asked me, and I said, yeah, I would.
Cool.
So he pulled in, and I hopped into his car, and we came down here and went in Capitol Studio B.
Wow.
And, you know, I was sitting up front, and I was telling Tom about this.
Do you remember what year it was?
69.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
And I was interested. I was sitting up front. I forget the producer. He was a named producer of the time of San Francisco bands.
Right.
It's on the album, the first album.
I'll check it out.
But I was then drawn to the back of the room, or seriously back from the console, to this guy standing in front of an 8-track tape machine.
Nice.
And this is when there were no counters.
Right.
And there was no remote.
Right. You had to stand there. You were the tape op.
The tape op was a position.
Would it have been like a Scully or a Stevens or?
No, it was a original Ampex, I believe.
Okay, wow.
And I stood there and I watched him, and the producer or engineer would go, okay, we're going to re-record that guitar part on the second verse, starting at the beginning and finishing at the chorus.
Dude,
or something
how hard.
like that.
And he had to have all that shit together.
And so as I was telling Tom, I said, so the guy, they'd say, let's play that back. And he'd flip all 8 channels into playback.
Right.
Then they'd play it, and then they go, okay, go back, and we're going to record. Put that guitar on, that's on track 5.
Dude, and flip it into record without erasing anything.
Well, he would then flip it into sync.
Sync, right, yeah.
To play back off of the record head.
Right.
And then he'd put the one track into record. And at that time, it was his responsibility to go to like the first verse and everything.
Right.
And you did that by lowering the tape lifters, so that when the tape was going backwards, you hear, the sound of it going backwards, and you'd listen to it and go, oh, this is the first verse, or whatever.
Wow.
You had to do it by ear, hear where you were on the tape.
Wow.
And so I was fascinated by that, and I went overdubbing, and it's in sync. So I did research as best I could, and I bought a Roberts 2-track tape deck that had been made by Akai, and it was capable of doing in-sync recording. And so I was playing guitar.
Was it flat or was it vertical?
It was vertical.
Yeah.
And so I got that, and I would doodle around with my guitar. And
Was it quarter-inch tape?
yeah, it was quarter-inch
Okay.
tape. Yeah. And I did that.
Did you ever do lives? I mean, I know you did later, but during this time frame when you were managing bands and, just on the scene and stuff, were you ever interested in live sound at that point?
Nope.
Good for you.
No, I was just, this recording
You like
thing
the
was pretty
studio
cool.
thing.
And now,
Well, it all worked out, by the way.
yes. Now, I feel that to a certain extent, I am the epitome of money for nothing and your chicks for free.
Oh, yeah.
Because after all this, and, I went to college in Santa Barbara, and I flunked out of the business management part.
But you were a music major, no?
Well, and then
Business.
I went back and I took all music courses.
Oh, okay. Which were, like, what kind of music courses?
Theory for 2 years.
Good for you.
Orchestration, arranging, history.
Oh, my God, that would make you the best producer on
Everything.
the planet.
And then I also took other courses, which I liked. I took 2 years of psychology
Yeah, I was a psych major.
and other assorted courses.
Very helpful when dealing with musicians, psychology.
Never thought of it. But anyway, putting myself through college, I was working at my uncle's appliance store
Okay.
as a delivery man. And I was my same height, more or less.
Were you about 6'1"? How tall are you?
No, I'm 5'10".
Oh, okay.
Maybe 5'10" on a good day.
He was 5'11", now he's 5'10".
And I was 125 pounds, and I was delivering refrigerators
Oh,
and
my
washers and
God.
dryers.
Are you going to tell me you hurt your back?
No,
Oh,
I
good.
didn't. And the boss, which happened to be my uncle that owned the store, he said, "How do you do it?" And I go, "Well, I strap the refrigerator onto the dolly, and then I get back, and I take a running thing, and I go up a couple rungs, and I throw myself back, and as soon as I get it balanced, I'm okay."
Jesus.
I delivered appliances for 2.5 years.
Oh, my God.
And if I had something that I couldn't haul it up the stairs or whatever, I'd call the shop, and they'd send somebody else
Yeah,
to help me.
Yeah.
But I did that, and then during the course of that, I was being frustrated with my Akai tape deck, and I noticed in some trade publication that TIAC was coming out with a 3340, which was a 4-track tape deck capable of simulsync. And it was released in Japan, but wouldn't be in the United States for another year or more. Well, it happens my dear old uncle was going to Japan for an appliance
you can't
convention.
Make this up.
And I said,
Hey.
"Hey, Uncle Dick, according to this book here, they're selling this, and it's going to be $900. And I've got $900. When you
a
go
lot
to a
of money.
convention, would you look for one of these?" I think it was 2-3 weeks later, he comes back with a box
We love
and
Uncle
gave
Dick.
me money back
Aw.
because over in Japan it was only $500.
We love Uncle Dick.
So I had this machine, and I bought a little Sony, I think it was like 6-channel mixer that was mic or line. And
What kind of inputs are these? Like quarter-inch RCA? What's the
quarter-inch.
connector? Okay.
Yeah, I think it was a 1/4 inch.
Okay.
And then and I did that, and I decided, I don't know, at some point that I wanted to be a rock star, and so I wrote some songs and recorded them myself and did
Yeah.
that. I took them into town because there was a studio in town. This is like a year or two later. Studio in town that could mix the stuff, and so they mixed
In
it
town
down.
in Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Santa Barbara Sound?
No.
Okay.
No, it wasn't Santa Barbara Sound. Anyway, I did that and took my tape, and I decided I'm going to solicit this to record companies. I knew that coming to Los Angeles would be foolhardily, or foolish. And so I got essentially a round trip, but a one-way open-ended ticket to Europe.
Wow.
Spent 3 months traveling around Europe on a Eurail pass, and then ended up in London.
What was it? What was your music on? Was it on reel to
It
reels?
was on a 3-inch, maybe 5-inch
Reel-to-reel.
reel-to-reel 1/4 inch tape.
Yeah.
And I took it with me. And prior to that, when I was working at the appliance store, I played acoustic guitar with a
Right.
couple of guys around at little cafes and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I had my guitar shipped over to me just in case anybody wanted a live audition.
I love this.
And there's a whole story behind the guitar too. So anyway, I went around to A&Rs. I got what they call a bed sit. Can't call it a studio apartment because it was slightly wider than a twin bed.
Right, yeah.
With a sink and a little table and then a dresser and an armoire for hanging clothes. And, the bathroom was down the hall.
Yeah, if you turned around, you'd hit the other wall. Tiny.
Yes, yeah, that was it. And then I got a job working at a pub in downtown Soho.
Nice.
And I would walk from my apartment into Soho 3 days a week to work at the pub. But when I would go early and I would go to record companies and I'd say, hey.
And they'd let you in?
They would let me in and they would make an appointment. And
How professional.
I would go in with my tape and the A&R guy would say, here, yeah. And I'd give him the tape. He'd put it on the tape machine, thread it up, and play the entire tape.
Wow.
And then tell me, it's not really what we're looking for.
Oh, bummer.
And so I did that for, I don't know, a month and a half, 6 weeks or something.
What would you have described the style of your music as? Was it like folky? Was it rock?
Rockish.
Got it.
I would say.
Rockish, okay.
I was into sort of more, not heavy metal rock, but rock and...
You'd heard Hendrix by then, so we'd all heard stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So, like acid rock?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, before I did this, my other career in music was some friends of mine had a light show.
Yep.
If you remember the this is
dude with the overhead projector.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oil,
water, food coloring.
And they had a light show, and I had a van.
Oh, best friend ever with the van.
We used to do concerts for a production company. I forget the name of it. Robert Nargisantz or something like that was the promoter.
Okay.
And the concerts were mainly out at the Orange Pavilion in San Bernardino. And we'd go out there and do the concerts. We did Eric Burden and the Animals,
Dude,
and we did a bunch of big groups.
I love the Animals.
And then in '69, I think this is before I got into the whole recording stuff.
Right.
The light show dropped me because one of the guy's brothers had a van, and they could use his van instead of mine.
Dude, why do people keep thinking they don't need Toby? I think they're dumb.
Well, it turned out that I had done so many concerts with this promotion company or production company that I called up the head of the company and I said, hey, the light show company, they dropped me, and you got a concert coming up here. It was the 1969 Palm Springs Pop Festival.
Wow.
Which was at a drive-in theater.
Well, who would have been at Palm Springs Pop Festival in that year?
Well, the second day, the headliner was Ike and Tina Turner.
Oh, my God, how
cool.
cool.
The first day, though, it was John Mayall and the Blues Breakers.
Huge.
And that's when Eric Clapton was with them.
Yes.
Of course, I didn't know nothing from nothing then.
Yeah.
But I went and I worked at that concert. And then the next day, I didn't have to work at that one, but I was there. I went to the Ike and Tina because the first one was at this outdoor movie theater.
Right.
And then the second one is a ballpark.
Okay.
And so I went through that, and then the guy said, yeah, fine. And so then I did concerts for them.
When you say you did concerts, you were just...
Stagehand.
Gotcha, okay.
A stagehand. And, some of the big ones was, and I tell people, when UCI opened...
Right. University of California, Irvine.
Yes. One of the first acts that went in there was Led Zeppelin.
Oh, my God, how cool is that?
And I was standing backstage like here, and here was Jimmy Page's amplifiers.
Yep.
And he's standing right there.
Yeah.
And he, with his violin bow,
yeah.
which at one point in time I got a violin bow.
Nice.
And,
but he's a nice guy.
I did that. I did a Rod Stewart concert.
How'd you like Robert Plant at that time? I love his singing.
Yeah, it was all good.
Yeah,
I
was
into
stuff.
it.
John Paul Jones is badass.
Yeah, the whole band
John
was
Bonham
great.
was badass.
They were all great.
Pretty badass.
Everybody. Well, the professional musicians were professional musicians back then.
Yeah.
And I had gotten to know a lot of them, not personally, but by reputation and things like that. And I don't know, after a year or something like that, or I forget when, I applied because there was a guy in Santa Barbara that was putting on concerts at the Earl Warren Showgrounds.
Oh, no.
And the Earl Warren Showgrounds had what's called the Flower Pavilion, was sort of indoor.
Okay. Like a big gazebo or something?
No, it was a big thing. I think it held, 1,000 people or something like that. And he had acts there. Jimi Hendrix played there.
Nice.
And then I remember going up to the guy because he was quite personable. His name is Jim Salzer, who's passed, unfortunately. But I went up to him with my best friend one time, and I went, "Hey, this band is really cool. Where'd you get them?" And he goes, "Los Angeles. They cost me $300 to get them up here." It was the Doors.
Oh, my God.
When they were the opening act for the big act.
Oh, my God,
dude. And Janis Joplin played in there. And anyway, so a few years later, I approached Jim, and I said, "Hey, I need a job." And I told him my background. He made me stage manager.
We love him.
And
we love this man.
he made me stage manager. And I always wore the same thing. And actually, where I live up in Whitefish, there was a friend of mine that grew up in Ventura, and he used to go to the concerts. And he remembered me from the concerts.
What did you wear?
I always wore the same thing. It was a pair of white navy issue tennis shoes, blue jeans, and a red and white big wide striped T-shirt.
Is this so they could find you?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Because he made me stage manager.
Okay.
And that way, wherever I was, if somebody
you could
said,
see Toby.
"Hey, who's the stage manager?" They go, "It's that guy over there in the red and white T-shirt."
Nice.
And
very smart.
So then, this is back in the day when at these concerts you had the local DJ announce.
Yeah, he's the MC. Yeah.
Yes. Well, except that our DJ was particularly, thought well of himself.
Yeah.
And he said he wouldn't announce anything other than the main act.
Oh, please.
So Jim goes, because I had been going, "Okay, do this and don't do that," talking to the crowd.
Did you get to introduce the Doors?
No, this wasn't Doors. This was bigger because they moved outside
okay.
to the outdoor horse arena, which held like 5,000 or more people.
Who was it? Who'd you introduce?
Blind Faith.
Oh, man.
There's Blind Faith. Who was another? Rabbit Mackay and the Somas Rhythm Band.
That I don't know.
And then somebody else. But when Blind Faith went up, Steve Winwood was with them and the whole thing. And, I did that for a number of concerts.
Steve Winwood was young, too, man.
Oh, yeah.
He was young. But Spencer Davis, that whole time frame, really young.
Yeah. And so then, fast forward to, I had my 4-track tape recorder. I go to London. I get turned down. I go back to New York. I got sidetracked by a friend of mine. I spent a year in Buffalo, New York,
good God,
managing bands.
Oh, Lord.
And with my 4-track tape recorder, recording a guy, producing him, taking the tape to New York.
What was his
Nobody
name?
wanted. Robert Westcott.
Okay. Why does that name sounds familiar?
Good acoustic guitar player, singer, songwriter. He missed out. Oh. But then
it's all about timing.
Doodled around that, and I thought, I got to get a job different. So I applied at the University, State College, whatever it was.
In Buffalo still?
In Buffalo. And in order to get a job working at there, I had to apply, and it took me like 3 months to get a first-class FCC license.
Oh, wow. Would that be the same as like a DJ? Similar?
Oh, this was like, you got to study electronics and all that. This is a first-class engineer's license.
Okay, this is, more like the technical.
All I wanted to do was go in and, play records or something. But
it's technical.
So they put me doing in the technical department. And that's where sort of another turning point in my career. I'm going in the editing room because our job as this assistant engineer was to edit the hums and ahs and spaces out of broadcasts and things like that.
Right.
Something that
the Hill's probably going to have to do later with me. Yeah.
Or Keith in the other room. Yeah. And up on the wall was 2 sheets of paper. And on the one sheet was a piece of 1/4-inch tape. And this is in the editing room where there's a lot of pegs on the walls, a lot of empty reels and tape machines, and you can hear
Razor
it, and that's where you
blades.
edit. And there's two pieces, and there's a piece of 1/4-inch tape and a picture of one of the other engineers in there with him there, and he's got tape around his neck, reels and everything, like this. And it goes, "What I am doing." And then the other one is a piece of 2-inch tape and a picture of a guy sitting at this big console, and that what I could be doing below that.
Nice.
And I went, I want to be that one.
Yeah, I want to be guy at the console.
And so I moved back with my parents in Santa Barbara.
How old are you now? 20s?
No, yeah, I was like 26.
Okay.
25, 26, something like that.
What are mom and dad thinking about your? They're supportive.
Yeah, they're okay.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and so I wanted to get into this engineering thing, and so I don't know where I found it, but there was a school that was called RIA, Recording Institute of America, and I applied, and I went to class there at Ed LeBeau's studio on Sunset, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah, on Sunset. It was down near, what is that, La Cienega?
Yeah, it's by La Cienega. It's still there. That building's still there. I think the sign, now it went from Ed LeBeau, Art LeBeau.
Yeah, maybe Art LeBeau.
Art LeBeau. The sign is still there, I think.
But
wow.
So I took this class, and it was it was a lot like the courses you take today out at USC or Berkeley or NYU, except that it was only once a week for 3 hours for 6 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And there was like 25 kids in the class. And, we were on a Spectrasonics console.
Okay.
And we learned all about recording. Now, I knew a little bit about it from having been around.
But you learned some signal flow, like routing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was apt enough that the instructor then had me assist for him out at gigs that he went to at studios.
Cool.
And so I graduated from that, and I went, well, this is cool. And then they offered the advanced course. So I decided to take the advanced course. And these courses were like $300 or something.
Yeah,
it wasn't much.
It's a lot of money, though, still.
So I took the advanced course, and the advanced course was at Paramount Studios on Santa Monica Boulevard.
Which was owned by James Brolin's brother, the actor. It was his brother who opened Paramount, and I should know his name. He was the original founder of that place, and it would have been in the late 60s, early 70s. And it's still Paramount's still there.
Yeah.
And owned by Adam and Michael, who are great, and my friend Eli's the manager.
Yeah. Well, I went there, and now there's only 7 students in the advanced class.
Oh, okay.
And after about 2 classes, I went, And I was also good at what I did, in
doubt.
school. And I went, all of these kids are going to be graduating, and they're going to be looking for a job.
I'm going to drop out.
No. I said, I'm going to look for a job now.
Yeah.
So I made up a resume of every place I had had my 4-track tape recorder. I called it a studio, gave it a different name.
Oh, I love that.
And then since I'd lived in London...
You created fake studios?
They weren't fake. I mean, I had a 4-track and I did recording. And then since I had been in London, around, I knew the name of a couple of...
major studios.
Yeah. I mean, we're not talking Trident or
Abbey
Air
Road.
or Abbey Road or anything. I picked an obscure one over on, what was it, Denmark Street, I think.
SARM or something.
But so I made up a resume, and I picked. I had always been into the back cover of albums.
Yep.
And so I went, these studios, and so I picked like the top 10 studios that had been on records that I liked, and I went around to all of them, handed in my resume, said, well, and then I would call them back or go back like days or a week later.
Yeah, you got to persist.
And
but don't be a pest. It's a fine line.
Yeah, well, there's a think about that. And so I did that. And then I went around, and in my follow-up, I went by this studio on Santa Monica Boulevard. It was Clover. And Clover had been on a few records.
Yeah.
James Taylor.
Oh, yeah.
Linda Ronstadt.
I started in the 80s, and it was a known studio. I was aware of it.
James Taylor, Linda Ronstadt. Who's the Bob Dylan-esque guy that died? Yvonne Elliman did a big hit there. Neil Sedaka did his Sedaka's Back is there.
What a great singer.
And so I walk in the front door, and I made a wrong turn, and I went in, and I'm in the control room.
Oh, Jesus.
And this is like at 8:30 in the morning.
Oh, okay. Phew.
And there's a guy up there, and he's fiddling around on the console, and I go, hey, I wanted to follow up. Who's the studio manager? And he goes, well, I can talk to you. He was sort of a studio manager, maintenance tech.
Okay.
And I explained to him, I'm looking for a job. I want to be an assistant engineer, an engineer like that. And at the end of the conversation, he goes, well, actually, we do need somebody.
Love this guy.
And he goes, so when can you start? And I go, right away. Okay, be here at 6 o'clock tonight. Report to the only other assistant there, Stuart Whitman, I believe, or Whitmore, Whitman. And so I went in that night, and it was a guy named Artie Wayne.
Familiar.
Disco thing.
Yeah.
And I sat there, and I was silent in the background, and then we had a lot of tape machines because digital hadn't been invented yet.
Yeah. And the tape machines would have been like Ampex's, maybe MCI or GH24.
It was a 16-track 3M.
Okay.
A 4-track 3M.
Okay.
A 2-track Scully, and then another.
What year was this?
Ampex.
Like 72?
75.
Oh, 75. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, some time had passed.
Okay.
Dawdling around doing other things. But
going to Europe,
And and so I was there, and I would back up the tape machines and try and help out without being in the way.
Yep.
And so the next day, I got up and went back in and talked to the guy, and I said, and he goes, I talked to Stuart, and he said, you seem fine, so we'll give you a job. And I went, okay. And he goes, when can you start? And I go, whenever. And he goes, great, you're taking over that session tonight.
Same one?
Yes. It's every night.
Right.
This is back when studios were booked by the hour.
Yeah.
Generally like 9 to noon, and then noon to 6.
Yeah.
And
We
then
still do
7
that
to
sometimes
10.
and do like overnighters. But
Yeah. But, and he goes, so you're there. Just one little issue. We can't pay you until like March or April.
When was this?
And this was in December.
Oh, Jesus.
And I went, that's okay. I've saved. I'm good.
So it's basically an internship.
Yeah. I was an internship, and I was working all the time.
You were a slave.
I wasn't a slave. I loved it.
Well, true.
I was gung-ho into it.
Nice.
And I did everything from sweep the sidewalks to clean the bathrooms and set up and break down.
It's
and do everything.
People ask me if it's any different. It's no different now. Even when you come out of school, for me, it's the same. You clean the toilets, you make coffee. If I can't trust you to get a food order right,
well, I tell kids,
why would I trust you?
that even if you're the valedictorian at Berkeley, which I consider one of the top, if not the top, recording and engineering classes in the United States, I say, when you come out of that, you will not get a job as a frontline engineer.
Yeah.
And I tell them, I said, what you'll do is you'll get a job. You have to be persistent. Go back until after, make sure you got a job as a waiter or waitress. It's like
so you can survive.
And keep going back. And at some point, the studio will tell you either never come back again because you're a pest, or you are so persistent that we'll give you a chance.
Yeah, I do like that. And you're right, it's a fine line.
And then back, when I started, I liked, because I worked with him, Chris Stone became somewhat of a friend.
I love him.
because Ron Nevison did a session. And these are names that who knows.
No, Ron Nevison. I have a whole connection with Ron, which I'll tell you probably off camera.
Ron came into Clover and did a couple sessions, and he goes, "What are you doing here?" And
Come to the record plant.
Yes.
Yes, because he was the chief engineer at the record plant.
Well,
technically.
I went over to the record plant and I talked to Chris.
Yep.
And he laid it out, and I would have gotten paid like 1,000% more than what I was getting at Clover.
Right.
But it was based on me bringing clients in.
Oh, shit.
And I didn't have any clients.
Oh, crap.
And I said, geez, I'd love to, but I can't, so I went back and stayed at Clover.
Oh, man.
But the thing is that if I talk at colleges or campuses, I tell them, you're not going to get a job as a first engineer. What you will do is you'll follow, and this was the procedure at Record Plant, is you get a job and you are initially a janitor gopher.
Both of my brothers worked at the record. All three of my brothers worked at the record plant.
Yeah, you're gopher, you go get this, you sweep the floors, you do that.
Yep.
Then after that, there's a chance that they will put you at reception.
Yep.
So that and people go,
Mike Klink worked the desk.
Yeah.
Jim Scott worked the desk.
They go, why would you do that? And I go, because as a receptionist, you don't have to learn how to be polite and respect everyone that comes in there and be efficient in organizing and
get
sending
setup
people
information, cartage drop off and pick up.
And all that. And so you learn that. And then after that, you're getting closer to being an engineer because then they will send you to the maintenance department. You will learn how to solder and what is a resistor and what's a transistor, what they look like and how they do that, fixing headphones, mic cables and everything. Yep. And then you will become an assistant to the assistant.
We call it a third, but yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I said, and then they'll let you move mic stands and cables, maybe not touch microphones.
Maybe not tube mics.
Yes, especially not tube mics. And do that, and then eventually you will progress of having satisfied that, then you'll become an assistant engineer. And I tell these kids, whoever's watching, if you're aspiring in this direction, when you graduate from this major college of engineering and production, do not spend the $25,000 and get a Pro Tools rig and go home and set it up in your garage or your secondary bedroom, because that will be the end of your learning and expanding career.
You need to be around people. You need to be around.
I say move to a city, apply at a studio that has at least 2 rooms, and a city that has probably 2 or 3 places like this.
This is such good advice.
Because as you progress up the ranks, when you finally get to that job as you are the assistant engineer, I go, you're going to be assisting behind people like me or my peers.
Or Nevison or whoever.
Yeah, which I could name a list of engineers that are all incredibly famous.
Yeah, talented.
They're also older.
But talented.
They're new guys. But
there's a lot of great new guys.
And I said, you'll be by this engineer that's experienced, knows what he's doing, and he's been hired by a producer that knows what he's doing.
He doesn't work for the studio.
Right, and he's producing an artist that has a budget.
Yep.
And you're going to learn from this engineer and the producer studio protocol of
the etiquette.
If you see something wrong, you don't go, hey, you keep your mouth shut and you whisper over the engineer's ear, hey, by the way, that. And so that's what I tell kids is to go through the steps. Now everybody thinks they're a first engineer because they graduated from Berkeley. And I will say that the guys that have graduated from some of these places, I've had them as assistant engineers. And I've had some assistant engineers that are now famous engineers.
Yeah, I've helped some careers along the way myself.
Yeah. One of the guys that was assistant for me at one time, the head of Berkeley College of Music recording, Rob Jasko.
Rob Jasko, he's the best.
He was an assistant for me.
John Paterno's at Berkeley now. He's an incredible engineer.
Who was it? Ed Cherney.
Ed Cherney, the best.
Was an assistant for me.
Good. Was that at Westlake, maybe?
It was a studio out in the valley.
Oh, okay. Rumbo, maybe.
On Lancashire or something.
Oh, interesting. Curious.
And the thing of it is that you have to go through this experience. What I liked, and I base my plan of what steps you're going to go through on the record plant in Los Angeles.
Yep.
Because who was the chief engineer there? I forget.
Well,
his
there was a couple, but there was like, I think Norm DeLugach was there at one point, but then you had Lee Kiefer and Ron Nevison, and you had guys that were engineers that acted as the chief engineer. Yeah. Lee Kiefer, super talented.
No, I forget what his name was, but
I should know. My brothers all worked there when I was in high school.
He was the chief engineer there, and he worked over at Clover, and we became decent friends. But at Record Plant, every Saturday at 9 o'clock in the morning, all the assistants and assistants and janitors, anybody that was part of the personnel that wanted to be an engineer, they had to report for class. 9 o'clock on Saturday morning. And it was like 3 hours long. They took them through the protocol and do this and don't do that and whatever. And
was Gary Kellgren, was he around when? Because Gary Kellgren was Chris's partner.
Yeah, well, that
he was a great engineer in his own right.
Well,
incredible.
He was, to a degree, instrumental in my jump to being an engineer.
Well, we love this.
Well, because
he didn't make it to a session.
No.
Okay.
But yes, in a way.
Okay.
There was a session booked into Clover, and it was a group, Capitol Records, and the producer engineer I couldn't get a hold of.
Oh.
He just didn't get back to me, because I would call up and say, hey, what are we doing? How many
I need to set up.
I finally figured out what it was. Couldn't get a hold of him for anything, so I set everything up like I would.
Perfect.
And, I'll eventually think of this guy's name. And so then it's the day of the session. It's like a Saturday. And the band comes in. They set up, and we're all ready to go. And the leader of the band gets a phone call. He goes, oh, our producer engineer can't be here. One of his best friends just died.
And it was Gary. Oh.
Yes. And the guy goes, oh, so...
Was it Eddie Kramer? Who would...
No.
But I know Gary passed, but I'm wondering who that person was.
I'll probably think of his name eventually.
Yeah.
But so he goes, can anybody here engineer? And I go, I can.
Good for you.
And he goes, oh, yeah, the assistant engineer says he can do it. So I started the session. The studio manager found out that I was doing the session.
At Clover or at Record Plant?
At Clover.
Okay.
And so he called in an engineer. I forget.
Dennis Moody worked there. A lot of people worked there.
But anyway, so I do the session. We've recorded the song or two or something like that. And this engineer comes in, and I knew him. And one of the on-call engineers was, of course, in my mind.
Dude, you're good. Better than me.
Anyway, he comes in, and he, this is back when there's the glass, the couch, the console.
Yep.
And he walks in front of the couch and comes, and I go, you stay away. This is my session.
Yeah.
You're not taking over.
Yeah.
And he goes, I'm just here to check. And so we did a playback of the one song or whatever we were doing. And he sat there and he went, oh. And he reaches up and he turned down by 1 dB the 50 hertz that I was adding to like the bass drum.
Okay.
And, he said...
Better or not better?
Well, what I learned is that the bass guitar is the instrument that occupies the very low end.
Okay.
And the bass drum, you don't need 50 cycles to blow it up to where it was. And he said, otherwise, it's good. And he left. And I finished the session.
We love this guy. We will remember his name.
Yes. Who's the other one that I was thinking of? Barry Rudolph.
Oh, I know Barry.
Barry was one of the
I know Barry.
on-call engineers.
Yeah, I know Barry well.
But anyway, that was, so I engineered this session. It was a group called Navasota. They were out of Texas, and they did a thing called Ida or something like that, and it was a single.
Oh, wow.
And
this is all still at Clover?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so anyway, that's, I worked at Clover for 7 years. The main producer that I worked with was Steve Cropper.
Okay.
And Steve was very nice. He always would give me lessons. We did he had audition for a Jackie Lomax, who was a famous English
Yep.
guy. And we went in, and Steve was showing me the old Stax things, because Steve was the
Very cool.
chief engineer and producer at Stax Records in Memphis.
How cool is that, dude?
And then, and he had learned from Tom Dowd,
Yep.
who was the chief engineer at Stax and taught him, and also taught Al Schmidt and
Yep.
half a dozen other people.
Yep.
And then when a session came in, Tom Dowd, I worked for Tom on a couple records.
What a genius.
And
Seriously, what a genius.
he was, I would say, no, I not would say, I say Tom was the most experienced expertise engineer producer I have ever worked with.
Dude, we owe so much to Tom Dowd. We stand on the shoulders of these guys. Dude. We never would have heard Derek and the Dominoes. Eric Clapton never would have met Duane Allman if it wasn't for Tom Dowd. And all the things that he recorded.
Leonard Skinner and
Oh
all
my
of them,
God, Leonard
from Ray
Skinner.
Charles on up.
Dude, everybody. I mean, and he was a pupine physics major in the 30s who then was, working for Atlantic, right? And he said he went back to college after the bomb. And he went back to college and he said, I just can't go back to school because they're teaching antiquated physics.
Well, no, what it
what he
was
said.
is that he couldn't get readmitted to college
is that
after
true?
the war
Oh, is that true?
because he couldn't reveal
Oh, right.
his work physics on the Manhattan
On the
Project.
Manhattan Project, that's right.
And so he decided to do this music stuff. And,
Thank God he did. Thank God for all of us.
yeah,
There's-
he would tell me that he and Ahmet would go out and
Erdogan.
find bands and bring them back to Ahmet's office and shove the desks aside to record bands there.
I love it.
And he did things, a lot of people don't realize, he invented and perfected the linear fader.
Oh, I know. No, I know. There's a documentary, and I used to make my staff watch it, the runners and the interns, and it's called The Language of Music.
Yeah.
And it's the greatest documentary about Tom. But
It's
he
about
talks
Tom.
about going to Abbey Road, and he's already using 8-track, and they're still using 4-track, and he's like, "What are you guys doing?"
Yeah.
yeah. Daisy
But,
chaining tape machines, and
Oh, yeah. And,
what a genius.
So he was, very good.
Him and Les Paul, and many others.
Yes.
But, yeah.
But, I stayed at Clover for quite a few years.
Bill Putnam. Yeah. We got
And
to put Bill
after
in there.
at some point, I would say probably in the early 80s, I began getting producers that would say, "You're really good, but I don't necessarily like working at Clover. It's a little limited. If you could go somewhere," and I go, "I can go. I run the studio." I was the chief engineer.
Yeah.
And when Chuck Plotkin took it over in '78,
Great producer.
he appointed me head of everything, sort of. And I said, "Well, I don't really want to manage it," so I got this other friend of mine that worked at the studio. He managed it, and I took care of the studio
Most of the
operations.
studio managers are women. Maybe Clover was an exception.
Well, the thing is, and I tell people, I guess I was ahead of the game because I hired 2 that I remember and a 3rd woman as an assistant engineer.
Good for you.
And the one gal went on to managing Clover after I left because I was paring myself away from
Yeah, you were weaning off of it.
Yeah, and because these people wanted me to work. And so I said, yeah, I can do it. And so I would go around to other studios to work for these producers.
And
doing
the
things.
sessions at Clover would be covered by the other assistants coming up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so it was, it was cool. It was a nice transition. And then
We do know that Chuck Plotkin did lead the way to your other long-term stint, did he not?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
that was it in '78, which was at the end of the lease that Chuck had leased out Clover from '74. It was like a 5-year lease.
Okay.
And it ended in '78. And in '78, he was working on a record. Of course, I can't remember his name. Cats in the Cradle, Silver Spoon, Yeah.
Oh my God.
Anyway, he was working on that record, and
Harry
Chapin.
Harry Chapin.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he sent the tapes back to Clover, and Greg Prestopino and I finished up. We did backgrounds on what was necessary, and I don't know what happened to it after that. But then Chuck came back into the studio to mix the last song for the Darkness on the Edge of Town album.
Yep. By Bruce Springsteen, if you're wondering. If you're forgetting who did Darkness on the Edge of Town.
And Chuck said, I've got to mix this because they had a problem and Jimmy Iovine wasn't getting what they wanted. And so I just oversaw him. And he did the mixing of it. And we finished it up and we sequenced it, and that was the end of it. And I met Bruce. And then Chuck and I worked together and did, probably 3, 4, maybe 5 records together.
With Bruce?
No.
Oh, other records.
Yeah, Chuck. And then I was engineering records and things like that. So I was keeping busy. And one of my favorite, if not my favorite records that I did was in, I don't know when it was, 80 maybe, 79, was a group by Columbia called Tommy Two-Tone.
Oh, we love Tommy Two-Tone.
And I recorded and mixed in the matter of days 5 songs by them, one of which was 867-5309.
Someone told me that if you dial that number, something, I don't know, there was something.
It's the most requested number in the United States for a phone number. You just can't get it.
If you don't know, 867-5309.
But
you don't know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, I did that. And to this day.
Sweet guy? Nice guy?
Well, Tommy was a band.
Right. He was a whole band, but yeah.
But they were very good and very nice.
Was there a Tommy in the band?
No.
That's funny.
No. But I did that. And we did a Cowsills record. And
great. I love the Cowsills.
Oh, yeah. And it went on. And then back in 80, Chuck gets a call from Landau that, hey, Bruce is finishing.
John Landau.
Yes, John Landau, Bruce's manager.
Yeah.
He wasn't his manager then. He was sort of his producer and advisor at that time. But he gets a call saying, we want you to mix this record. We've tried. Bob Clearmountain mixed it, and Bruce wasn't quite happy, and so he wrote some more songs.
Which one is it? Which record?
This is The River.
Okay, The River. Great
And
record.
so we want you to mix it. Well, Chuck's a producer, and he kept telling them, no, I'm a producer. I'm not a mixer. You lucked out on the Darkness record because I was able to do that, but I'm not going to do it again. I will oversee mixes, but I will not mix them. So they came out to California with Neil Dorfman, who
Lovely
I've known
guy.
him ever since then. He is a great
Sweetheart.
guy.
Yeah.
Excellent engineer, producer, mixer, everything.
Yep.
And
Talented guy.
they came into the studio, and Neil was going to mix, and I was going to oversee it.
Are you still at Clover? Are you still at Clover?
Yeah, this is at Clover.
Okay.
And so every day I would come in, and Neil would come in, and I'd set it up, and he'd go, okay, this is this, and, I'd get him going. And then they did this for a week. And then Chuck calls me up, and he goes, hey, they're not like, the mixes aren't any different. Neil is not changing anything. So I've told them I want you to mix it, and they said they'll give you a chance on Monday. So on Monday I show up at the studio, and now I'm the mixer. Neil comes in and tells me on the track sheet which you use here and there. Because you have to understand, back in these days of track sheets, you stacked stuff up on tracks.
Oh, no. Yeah.
The intro could be a guitar, and then the first verse is a vocal.
Who tracked everything on that record?
Neil.
Okay.
Neil recorded everything.
Okay.
Well, except for 2 songs which Bob Clearmountain did.
Gotcha.
But Clearmountain, I guess, saw that this was going to be a project and didn't want to invest 2 years of his life in doing this.
Right.
But so Neil's in there, and he tells me, oh, this is the lead guitar, and this is what you use then, like that. I'm like, okay. And I mix it, and after a little bit of remixing, Bruce goes, it's great, I love it. So then the next day, I come in, Neil shows me the songs, I mix another one, yeah, this is good. And on Wednesday, I come in, and Neil's not there. and I see John Landau in the hallway, and I go, "Hey, John, where's Neil? He normally tells me what tracks to do and
what we're doing. Yeah.
what to do." And he goes, "Neil's on a plane back to New York. You're doing fine. You're doing good. Don't change."
This is how a career is born. An additional part of the career is born.
Thinking I would change my mixing style or something like that. And so then I went on, and we spent the next 3 months or so mixing that. And that was something where when Chuck took over the studio, he wanted everything to be high fidelity and as pristine as possible. So I was given a budget to do whatever's necessary. One of the things, we had changed the Clover console, which had been in there when I first started.
Right.
And then we changed that in mid-76, I think, to an API 2488, which is 24 channels.
Yeah.
And we added 8 channels to it then, so I had 32 channels. And I knew a little bit about electronics, and I wanted to get it as clean and nice as I could. So the big deal then was these consoles was to change transformers.
Okay.
So there was a 1 or 2 transformers that were known to be changed. And then this guy named Dean Jensen, who made transformers.
Yeah, Jensen Transformers, yeah.
Yes. Now you all out there will know them as radial transformers or radial direct boxes. And so I ended up talking to Dean and going up to his house with a schematic of the board and going, "Isn't this a transformer? What can we do?" And he goes, "No, that one's okay, but this one we can fix."
You're one of the only people I know that's a recording engineer, has pretty deep technical knowledge, and then also did a lot of road work. You know, a lot of live sound, a lot of touring, a lot of, and building studios and on the fly. Like, okay, let's put a studio here.
Well, you know.
But I'm saying, like, what would they call that now? Integration. The integration of all the different gear.
And also, the one thing is that I always like to build in my own obsolescence in that I want this to be able to work by anybody.
Right, without me. Yeah.
Yes. And
was that good? Was that a good plan or a bad plan?
Well, I consider it a good plan because that means if I built a studio, anybody can come in and work it and figure out how to do it.
Yeah.
You know, and over the course of time, when we, I mixed the River, and then we did live recording out there, and then in '82, Bruce had started. He had in January he had recorded a bunch of demo songs on a 3344 cassette deck.
Yeah.
And that didn't even come up then, but he was producing a guy called Gary U.S. Bonds.
Yep.
With Steve Van Zandt, and they came out. It happened that we hooked up. I had just returned from a early retirement, learning how to ski in Lake Tahoe, and I came back, and he wanted me to mix this record. So I mixed it, and he loved it. Neil,
the Gary U.S. Bonds record or the
Yes.
Steve Van Zandt record? Okay.
Well, it turned out both of them.
Okay.
I mixed the Gary Bonds record, who Neil had mixed, but they didn't like everything about it.
But we love Neil.
Oh yes, Neil's great. I every time I see him, how you doing? What's good? But and then we started on Steve Van Zandt's record, and Steve was like, "Oh, this is great." After 2 or 3 songs, Bruce goes, "Guys, I got a record that I want to start working on, and I want to do it in New York. Can you take this back there?" Yeah.
This being what? Everything that you'd put together?
No. So we moved mixing of Steve's record to New York.
Oh, got it. Sorry.
To the Hit Factory.
Okay.
And recording of Born in the USA to the power station. So my schedule was noon to 6 p.m., Hit Factory, mixing Steve Van Zandt's record, or he liked the mixes so much it inspired him to write 4 more songs, and I recorded 4 more. And so I'm mixing that, and then at 6 p.m., Steve and I would walk the 2 blocks down the street to the power station, where we would start recording Born in the USA.
Bruce. So I was so confused. I thought Iovine did some sort of engineering or pseudo-engineering on Born in the USA.
Nope.
This is good to know.
His last
This is good to know.
engineering was at For the Darkness record. And then he went on. Now,
This is good
Jimmy,
to know.
because he had worked on Born to Run and the Darkness record, was always a friend, and he was always very nice. He would come
dude,
in.
unbelievable
And
influence.
whenever I was working on...
Oh, it was Born to Run that I was thinking of, not Born in the USA. It was Born to Run.
Yes, he had worked on that. And, he was very nice. And, Jimmy, if you're watching, thank you for
Oh, my God.
passing
Thank you
everything
for
on.
all the things you've done.
Yes. But he'd come in and he'd go, how does it sound? I wasn't a very good engineer, but how does it
That's
sound?
that's what I think I remember him being
and I go,
self-deprecating
it's
about
fine.
that.
I can deal with all this. It's good.
Yeah.
But so we went back and did Born in the USA, and then
What a great record. Dude.
I am very quick about doing everything, and I recorded Born in the USA in a day.
Oh my
It
God.
was 9 takes.
Oh my God.
And actually, they gave me permission. I will go around to colleges and universities, any that are out there anywhere. I do a thing that I called recording of Born in the USA. I have the Pro Tools session of the original archived master track. And John and Bruce have let me go out and I give it's about a 30, 40-minute presentation.
So a breakdown of how you did it.
I tell them I show you the track sheets. I show the power station and picture of the power station and this, that, and the other thing.
That's very cool.
We can listen and solo all the instruments, and I do
Dude,
that.
that is so cool.
And go out. And there's a whole story with that Born in the USA and that snare drum exploding sound and like that. And we went
I saw the show.
And then we did...
I saw the concert.
And then Bruce wasn't ready because we got to mixing within like 4 weeks or something.
Too quick for him?
Yes.
Okay.
He doesn't do records that fast.
God.
And
Please come book time here, Bruce. We'd love you to be here for months and months.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I've been in here for weeks and months on a time in other studios.
Yeah.
But so then we moved over to the Nebraska record.
I love that record.
Which is a whole story, which evidently they're making into a documentary about the recording and the hassle with getting that one to be a record. And then
Different record.
After the Nebraska, we had taken a break from working on Born in the USA because we started Born in the USA in '82, and then we took a break, and I came back to California and did a Bette Midler album with Chuck, and then Bruce came out, and we fooled around and talked with him and like that, and since we had been through the Nebraska syndrome.
Wait, so Born in the USA took like a hiatus. Nebraska comes out.
Nebraska was like 2 months worth of time.
Gotcha.
Maybe a month.
Gotcha.
Bruce tried to re-record the stuff, in the studio. It didn't work. We transferred stuff from the 4-track to a 24-track. That didn't work. And finally, one day we're in the Power Station Studio A, and Bruce goes, "Hey," and he pulls this cassette master out of his pocket and go, "Can we master from this?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "So what do we do?" And I go, "Give it to me and I'll transfer it to a real piece of tape."
Yeah.
So he tosses it over to me.
I
and
can't
I
believe he's
put
walking
it
around
on.
with it in his pocket.
Oh, it had been in his pocket since January.
Oh, Jesus.
And this is like June,
Oh, Jesus.
But so after that, then that winter, Bruce is out here, and he had a little house, and he said, "I want to do some demos. I don't suppose I can use that cassette deck." And I go, no, we're not using the cassette deck. And so...
Let me protect you from yourself and get you something good.
Yes. And so I got him and his guitar tech at the time, Mike Batlin. I taught Mike how to record. I got a little Trident Trimix console.
Yep.
And a MCI 8-track tape machine. And they got this up in this little tiny apartment over the top of a 2-car garage.
Oh,
and
right.
Bruce recorded County Fair, a version of Hometown, and 3 or 4 songs.
Oh, what a great
up
song.
there.
Hometown, what
And,
a great song.
And then we finally finished Born in the USA, did the whole touring of that.
So was Nebraska released in between? It was
Yes,
released before.
It was released before Born in the USA.
Oh, that makes sense.
Because
Okay.
we restarted Born in the USA in February of '83.
Got it.
With a week at the Hit Factory then recording. And we did record Hometown there and 3 or 4 other songs.
So good.
You have to understand, Bruce writes a lot.
He's prolific. Yeah, no, for sure.
On Born in the USA, I recorded over 65 songs.
Jeez. How did you pare down that? How did you?
Well, that was his job.
He just tells you what he wants.
Yeah, we'll use this with that, put it in this order.
What happened to the ones that didn't make it?
Oh, they get released.
Okay, good.
Oh, yeah, they come out.
Okay, good.
They've been out on various
Or
records.
in like live albums or compilations.
Well, let's see. We did Tracks in '98.
Okay.
Tracks was 66 songs. We added 4 new ones to that one.
And he is a prolific songwriter.
Yeah, and then during the course of time, when was it? In 2010, I guess it was, he and I recorded 40 tracks at home over the course of time.
Oh my gosh, this is crazy
But when we left, Born in the USA was over, and then we did a live album, and we did that out here at, let's see, where did we do that? We did some of it at the record plant, the one on Sycamore.
Right.
Because the other one was gone.
Yep.
And then we did other stuff, and...
maybe Sunset, maybe?
No.
I don't know.
I forget. Anyway. And then finished the live album, and then I guess it was 88. Yeah, no, 87. He says, don't we have some recording equipment? And I go, yes. He goes, can you set it up? And I set up the recording studio in what we called the Carriage House, at a house that he had purchased just the year before.
Where was this house?
This was in Rumson, New Jersey.
Okay.
On his property that was well known by all the locals. They'd drive by, yo, Bruce, holler out of their cars.
Nice.
Fortunately, I didn't get any of that captured on tape because we were right next to the road. And and that's when he said, "We'll set up the studio stuff." And
was it isolated? Well, it was far back enough and isolated enough physically isolated on the property that you didn't get a lot of other.
No.
No.
Oh no.
Oh no.
It was, it was probably maybe 100 feet from the road.
Oh crap! Okay,
and it was a major highway.
How'd you soundproof the thing?
I didn't.
Oh crap!
No. It worked out just fine.
Sounds like it all worked out.
Yeah. Well, the place, it was a carriage house. This was a house that was years old. It was a carriage house because there's room for 3 cars down below.
Okay.
But the garage spaces were made from Model Ts, old, thin cars. If you were putting
Skinny cars, yeah.
Yeah, in there. It was
Is it like a
difficult.
redwood carriage house, a.k.a. garage, but we're not going to call it a garage. It's a carriage house.
The house for the carriage keeper or the groundskeeper or whatever was over the top of it.
Okay,
so we had to go upstairs.
So there's an apartment up there.
And I had, when we were doing the live album, we bought, I think, 1 or 2 33 24s.
Yeah.
And so I had one of them. I put it in the kitchen.
You were always a big proponent of digital. You always were a fan.
You have to understand, when I mixed the River album, I wanted that to be as pristine
Clean.
and nice as I could.
Yeah.
And so the maintenance guy at Clover, I sent to the NAB in March of 80.
Right.
And he came back with this guy, Rick Plushner, who went on to be the head of SSL, the head
Neve.
of AMS, the head of Neve, head of Guitar Center, like others. Rick came back with this, what was called a 1600 digital prototype 2-track. And you had to have these big two big U-matic tape machines that took the giant tape and like that. And I mixed the River onto that.
Amazing.
And in the course of it, they didn't want to let me use the tape machine. And I said, it's not leaving the room. And Rick checked with the higher-ups at Sony, and they said, okay, it can stay. Because there were only 3. One was in Japan, one was in my studio, and one was in New York doing classical music or Barbra Streisand.
Okay, gotcha.
And I guess they opted to get a little rock music under it.
Get a little rock on the credits for the machine.
So we did that. It was on on this digital machine. And they said, well, you can't keep it because this is a prototype. I said, well, I've got to use it.
I can keep. I need to keep it.
Yes, I am keeping it. And so I guess it was about a month later, they had gone into production, and a company, I think it was there or Bruce Botnick, bought one and rented it to us.
Got it.
And then about a month after that, they came out with a digital editing system, which was based on video editing, where it's a matter of assembling from one machine to another. And Bruce Botnick bought one of those, and we had to take a little migration up to Bruce's studio, and that's where we edited things together.
Gotcha.
But that was all digital. And then when we started Born in the USA, Sony said, well, he's got experience with our stuff. And they wheeled a 3324 prototype into the area. And I wanted to use it. We had it all set up so I could mix to the...
A 24 or 48?
24. This is,
okay.
This is 2 years before 48
the 33,
tracker.
48. Yeah.
Yeah, 48s didn't come out until...
And then there was the
85.
Mitsubishi 32-track digital in between.
Oh,
that was kind of a weird little...
3M made a 32-track also.
Yeah, it was just a weird format. We think in terms of 24 and 48.
Yes.
You know.
But the 24-track tape machine, I would say, well, let's give it a try. And I go over, and Bruce would always go over and turn it off. And so when Sony took it back, and they said, well, what'd you think of it? And I go, well, I don't know. I can't really give you an opinion because I never got to use it. Every time we turned it on, Bruce said it's too noisy, and he turned it off. So they changed all the fans in it. That was our contribution to the 3324.
Thank you for the quiet fan.
Yes. And so then when, fast forward a few years, I'm setting up the studio at the Carriage House, and I had learned from setting up Bruce's studio in the fall of 82 that I didn't want to put a 2-track reel-to-reel in there. And so I wanted to get a digital 2-track because I had used one and I knew that they existed. So I found the first one I got was at the advice of Bruce Jackson.
Yep.
Who
the creator
the founder
Apogee.
of Apogee.
Yeah.
He said, get an F1 because Sony is doing it to 44.1 is their sampling rate, and that's what's going to be the standard of the industry. Because you have to understand, when I did The River in 1980, I was scratching my head going, why has Sony put millions of dollars worth of research and development into a 2-track tape machine for use in recording studios? And then in 1984, as we're releasing Born in the USA, they come out with the CD. And I go, oh
yeah,
those sneaky Sony people.
But I never thought CDs sounded very good.
Well,
they were what we were used to.
Nobody knew then.
Yeah.
It was LPs,
Yeah, but see, I like analog.
Well, but everybody liked quiet too.
Okay, all right. And you
so,
like quiet because the river, you want to be pristine, all that.
Well, so anyway, they did that. And then when Bruce had set up the studio in New Jersey, I got a hold of Bruce Jackson, and he had the first run, of Apogee digital filters for the 3324. Right. And he had one of his associates, a guy named Gus Skinnis, come out, and he installed them. That was the tape machine that we used to record Tunnel of Love.
So with the filters on the digital machine.
Yes, and evidently, I never got a chance to A/B between a stock machine and a filtered machine, but I was assured by plenty of people that it was an improvement.
And Bruce is a smart guy.
Yeah. And so I did that. We started this Tunnel of Love, and Bruce had said, this is Springsteen, can you operate a synthesizer or computers? And yes, I can. I had done a year of working with a disco producer in New York. And he did everything himself. And so he taught me how to use synthesizers, ADSR, and what that all means and how to deal with it. And so I said, yes. And he goes, drum machine? I go, yeah, I can work a drum machine.
Was the Lynn drum machine?
It was a Lynn drum machine, a 3000, the old clunker like that. And so we recorded Tunnel of Love in, a couple of months.
What synthesizer was it? Like it was a Kurzweil.
Yeah, we had a Kurzweil, and then I had also introduced them. Yamaha had the DX.
Yeah.
I think it was a DX, and then we also had a Korg M1.
Okay.
So those were our sort of both of those instruments, the DX7 and the Korg M1, had this pad sound that was just Bruce's favorite background sound, and we would use that.
That's
but
funny.
We needed something else, and so the Kurzweil served as a piano, an organ, horns, strings, everything else like that.
Right.
And we made this whole record, and then overdubbed the E Street Band on it, and it came out, and Bruce went on tour with the E Street Band, and I forget when that was, 88.
Right.
And on, and I guess it was, I was very lucky in that back in 85, I think it was, when we started on a live record. I didn't know we were starting on a record. You never know. They don't tell you.
Got to be ready.
Yeah. John Landau took me into his office, and he goes, hey, I think he did, and he said, hey, we need some little bit better mixes of some of these live shows. And so just take care of it, and we'll give you the dates of the shows. And so
Did you get points on any of these things?
No.
Uh-oh.
Well, I got points on some records.
Oh, gotcha. Good.
But, and so they would just give me a list. And so I booked the Hit Factory, who I'd become good friends with Eddie Germano and Troy Germano. And I booked the Hit Factory from, I think it was like 10 to 6, 5 days a week to do this.
Was Zoe around then? Zoe was managing maybe? Might have been Zoe Thrall, Pat.
I forget.
Yeah, great manager.
She could have been at the big Hit Factory.
Yeah.
And I forget whether I was working at that one or
I
think the old one is where
and then
I was doing this.
Lord Alges came around,
but,
Chris and Tommy.
And I would just transfer these tapes, and I'd do mixes. We had quick mix, medium mix, and a little bit better mix. A little bit better meant that, I would ride stuff and, make sure it's good and do that. And then I'd transfer them all to digital because they were all analog. And then...
Did you do most or all of the archiving of Bruce's work? And that was another huge job that you did.
I started that in 1985.
Okay.
When, at that time, Bruce would give me a call and he'd go, hey, I need a copy of a song. And he'd give me the name of the song, and he'd tell me the approximate year that it was recorded and possibly the studio. And it was up to me to go find it.
Find it, yeah.
Well, at that time, Sony Music, no, they were still Columbia then. I don't think Sony had taken them over. Columbia had all of their tapes on 5x7 cards based on a work order.
Oh, I know. I had a tape library, and it was,
and I go, how do you find
well, we
this
didn't
stuff?
really have computers, not really.
No. And they...
It's a filing system,
well,
and
I looked at this and I went, this is no. So I approached Landau and I said,
I need to archive all this.
We got to do something about this.
Yeah.
So he gave me the budget. I found 2 programmers, and this is in 1985.
Wow.
Now understand, I had hired a studio maintenance tech at Clover in 1978 that said, I'll be your maintenance tech, but you have to give me a room for my computers.
And you're like, what's a computer? Yeah.
An 8088.
Wow.
We're talking way back there.
Yeah.
And I used to use that and off onto Radio Shack cassette decks to back it up and back and forth. Anyway, I hired 2 programmers. I told them all the parameters of what I wanted, studio, tape, date,
year, all the information,
song, notes,
so you could search everything. It by multiple fields.
And so they created a database in 1985 using the original D-Base program.
Right.
Those of you that are computer people, you know.
Pre-Cubase.
Oh, this is way back there.
Yeah.
And then I bought at that time a portable computer. It was called a Panasonic Executive Partner. It was like that long, this wide, and that thick, weighed about 45 pounds.
Jesus.
But it had
That's
a keyboard.
still little, though, for computers back then.
Well,
Computers
then
were
they're in
huge.
rooms.
Yeah.
But I had that, and I kept on, and Columbia gave me a room at the 54th Street. It was where they had their mastering.
Yeah.
And I and a couple friends of mine, I had told them what to do. We spent weeks, months in there. They would just bring us a pallet of boxes down from Iron Mountain.
Yep, I was going to say Iron Mountain.
Pull out a tape. Okay, set it up here. They'd enter all the information.
Did you, now I know, one of the things I remembered about you, and I don't know why I remember this about you, was that you were always checking out new formats. I mean, obviously we've talked about digital and you wanting to be pristine and clean, but I remember you was the Gen X, the Fairlight, like all these new innovative things would come out, and you would be the guy who would like.
Well, I'd always give them a try.
Like it, yeah, give it a chance.
I think when we were doing the live album, we had a bit of humor with that one because we were working on a 3324, I believe, and I don't know, I found out, I think it was a synclavier. Mm-hmm. It was a little gadget. It was a keyboard this big and it had sort of a slope thing. You could put a card in it. Maybe it wasn't a synclavier.
Synclavier was pretty big, so maybe like a Nord or something. So like a sampler.
Yes, it was a sampler.
Okay.
Started with an E, I think, something like, I forget. But you could hit a key and you go, huh, 1, 2, 3. Ha, get down.
I love that.
You know,
dude, that's awesome.
And so that was our humor around the studio. Boo, ha. You
Get
know, you
down.
just go back and hit it. And,
I love that, dude.
But yeah, I'd always been, you know, I had the ability because of Bruce's standing with the record company.
Yeah.
And
You could try new stuff.
yeah, you know, he was impoverished prior to the river.
Really? Oh, from advances.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Divorce.
but then when we
things.
did the river, he had Hungry Heart, his first number one or
Big.
close to number one hit.
made money.
And so he made money, and then Born in the USA.
I'm going to guess you've worked on 25 or 30 platinum albums at least.
Well, I think they have me listed as 18, but I think it's closer to the low 20s.
Okay, I would guess so, for sure.
And that's just the ones that I was directly responsible for.
Right.
There's a bunch of others that, you know, Sony has pulled this off and made the Essentials Part 2, the Essentials Part 3, and
compilations,
everything else
etc.
like that. But so I created the archiving system, and then I started archiving it, and I believe that they have completed the archiving of all of the live shows, all of his tapes, because I felt it was important.
Dude, it's really important for posterity. And then what about all those many, I mean, does he write in a notebook? Does he, you know what I mean? I mean, I
Yes.
know he would record onto different various types of tape machines, but is his process like, does he write lyrics
Yes.
down on a piece of paper?
He has a method that I'm sure he still uses. He has a 5-subject college-ruled notebook.
Yeah.
And he writes in there.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
Somewhere there's a bunch of notebooks.
I know exactly where they are.
Okay, good. We're not telling you. No one is going to find out from us.
I've always, you know, I've always been aware of Bruce's stature in the industry and everything. And so once upon a time, I said, those notebooks, you know, we probably ought to really take care of them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay. So he brings me a box full of them.
Oh, my God.
I took them down to Philadelphia, a place that restores like Ben Franklin's
Documents.
notebook.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a high-end research facility. Wow. Everybody in there is wearing white gloves and they've got masks on.
Yeah,
they're in white
Declaration
coats.
of Independence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they're doing stuff like that.
Wow.
And they archived all of them. They scanned everything. They put
Bruce,
them in archival.
You are lucky that you had Toby. That's all I'm going to say.
Archival notebooks and everything. And then I have them
God.
in a safe, in the safe room inside his lockdown storage facility.
Yeah.
And but I've always been aware of that, because I was lucky. I worked for the same guy who had a long career.
Yep.
It still continues.
Yep.
I mean, he's got shows booked in Europe coming up here in February or March or something.
And I mean, I want to kind of wind this down with that. You also did lots of other things and are still doing lots of other things and worked with other artists. And you're living in Whitefish, Montana. I know that you have a setup there.
Yeah, my Cabin 6 recording.
Yeah, and Toby is for hire, by the way. Okay, I want to just say, and if you can't find him online, you could probably call me, and I'll get you in touch with Toby. Yeah. And if he listens to what you've done and he likes it, you might get to do a record with Toby Scott.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you've had such a long career, and you did work with Bruce for such a long time, but you are known and applauded by all of our peers for having done lots of other things. You work with Bob Dylan, you work with, like you said, Bette Midler, and Tommy Two-Tone, and
Blue Oyster Cult.
Blue Oyster Cult, right? Oh my God, I love Blue Oyster Cult. But all of these great bands, and you're still doing it. You still love it.
Oh yeah, it's what I do.
Are people sending you stuff in Montana?
While I was down here, I got some guy sent me an email that he wants to record a half a dozen songs. And
oh, cool!
Bring his band in. I said, well, I like to make sure, because I'm working in an environment where the people aren't professionals and backed by record companies that have already vetted them for how professional they are. So I always like to meet with the artists or talk to them and say, okay, the songs that you want to record, are you sure about the lyrics?
How well rehearsed are you?
Yes. Have you rehearsed?
Yeah.
You don't have to over-rehearse. Do you know the tempo? Be sure and check different tempos, speed it up. Do you know the key? Compare the key to the tempo. Yep. They're all interrelated. Do that, and then come in and...
Okay, you're basically you're just producing people constantly with your advice.
Yeah, and I tell them, also, when you come in, bring your lyrics, print it out. And they go, I don't need them, I can remember them. Every time. They're every time. You come in the studio, and if they're local people, I require that they come into the studio.
Oh, good.
Especially if they have never been in a studio before.
Oh, good.
Because it's a different environment.
Yeah.
Because I tell people, I live here. I have literally lived, when I was doing the Tommy Two-Tone record, I lived in the studio for like 5 days.
Yeah.
I mean, I slept on the gobos that were, gobos and packing blankets.
Yeah.
And so it's home for me. Yeah. I'm perfectly at home. But for somebody else, this is typical. The band will record their demos at home. They're sensational. They come into a studio and
they choke. Yeah.
Oh, geez, it doesn't have the same feel as the demo. Well, so anyway,
we're in a building where there were some demos done, like that Lou Adler, I think, or John Phillips had the demos of the Mamas and Papas in Studio 3, and I think they kept a lot of that original demo material from some of that stuff.
If it's
good,
recorded,
right?
If it's recorded well or decently, it's fine.
And if the emotion of the track is superior.
Yeah.
I
tell artists and everybody, I go, it's the performance and the song.
Absolutely.
It's not the recording. It's not the engineering. It's
not the tools.
It's not the producer. It's the performance and the song. I don't care.
Does it make you feel something?
Yeah. I mean, I go as an example. Bruce recorded on a 4-track cassette machine, and it sold millions.
Yeah, exactly.
And there are others that are examples of it was recorded on a cassette.
But I think you're a living embodiment of understanding the importance of equipment, the importance of the tools, and trying to have the best you can possibly have, but serving the song.
Yes. Well, to an individual artist, of those of you out there that, I got FL Studios or Logic or Pro Tools or whatever.
Ableton, whatever.
I say, every minute and hour and day that you spend learning how to be a recording person is taking away from you being an artist, singer, songwriter.
Yeah. Let someone else do it.
Yes. Get 2 other people. One is some nutcase that wants to be a recording engineer, and another one is an IT and social media
guy. There you go.
And your
There's
best
your
bet.
team.
Yes.
Well, I'm going to wrap this episode up. No, we could talk for days. You're so lovely.
I have to come back for the other half of
We'll
the
do
career.
part 2. We're going to do part 2 for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I was so lucky that you came into LA and you came into town, and you're so awesome. And I thank you so much for doing this, because I think it's important for people to know how people got where they are, and there is no one way to get your dream job. And he's still doing his dream job.
Yes.
He still loves it. I still love what I do.
Yeah.
You know, and the way they say, if you love what you do, it's not a job, you know?
Right.
Yeah, so Toby, it's so great to have you here.
Thank you.
And Trade Secrets, I'm Candace Stewart. This is Toby Scott. That's a wrap on it.
Thanks a lot.
We can talk